Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our second of three webinars leading up to CultureEQ 2018 in March. These webinars are designed to provide you with some of the information that we're going to be discussing in the workshop live and give you some idea of where we're coming from with the hands-on activities in March. So let's take a quick look at where we are in the process with the webinars. So last time, a couple weeks ago, we started talking about compliance and how that affects the world of sexual harassment. And I encourage you to check out our last webinar on compliance. It's recorded and is available on the landing page. We'll provide links for you a little later in the webinar. And then next time we'll be talking about civility specifically, but this time we're going to focus in on leadership and leadership's role in preventing harassment in the workplace. So Dr. Larry, would you mind introducing the folks that we have on the call today?
Sure, love to, Lawrence, thank you. So today we have four of us on the call. There's Lawrence that you heard, and myself, and Sejal Friday, attorney, as well as attorney Tim Del Castillo. So give you a brief introduction on all of us. I'm in the business of engaging lifelong education, continuing to build, modify, change, act pretty much as I always have. My formal education culminates in a doctorate in organizational psychology, and I have lots of professional training, conferences, and such. I've got 40 years of experience in the area of working with people in the workplace, and so my personal mission and our company mission is to maintain and restore dignity in the workplace. Lawrence has 15 years of experience in designing, facilitating workshop programs. His clients have included Verizon Wireless, a number of major grocery retailers, the state of California. Recently, Lawrence has spent time connecting the employee behavioral elements of solving sexual harassment epidemic with the legal training that exists and is evolving. So moving on to Sejal. Sejal possesses litigation experience in employment-related matters with an emphasis on wrongful termination, sexual harassment, discrimination, and retaliation cases. She counsels management, human resources personnel, and employees on all facets of employment relationship. She also provides workplace civility training that focuses on promoting respect and civility in the workplace, along with focus training on eliminating unwelcome or offensive behavior that is based on characteristics protected under the anti-discrimination laws. Tim practices employment law, providing strategic and preventative advice and counseling to employers and executives. His time that he has spent with international law firms representing large institutional clients have provided Tim with unparalleled training and experience in navigating the often complex world of California and federal employment laws. What he enjoys most about his now independent practice is helping individuals and small business owners for whom employment-related legal issues often hit closer to home. Tim, Sejal, Lawrence, and I have been working on this team and developing a response to the sexual harassment phenomenon that has really come to blossom recently, and Lawrence is going to pick up some of that from here.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Larry. We're going to start things off today talking about how leaders can help prevent harassment and discrimination. And that first area, Dr. Larry, what is it that leaders can do when they're faced with these kinds of challenges at the workplace?
Sure. Well, we know that leaders guide entire cultures of workplaces, all aspects of it. So this is no exception in terms of harassment, bullying, sexual harassment, whatever, setting that kind of a tone certainly is up to the leaders. And one of the first things that leaders do is provide a vision for an organization. And for instance, as you're seeing there on the screen, Facebook, for instance, set out a vision around this harassment issue and how employees would be treated. And they're saying at Facebook, we believe it's essential to provide all employees with a respectful and safe working environment. As a result, we don't tolerate harassment or any mistreatment of employees in the workplace or work-related situations. Now, I'd like you to pay attention to a couple of things in there. It's, I think, really good leadership characteristics here in setting this vision. They're saying that we believe, so it's setting out that it's across the organization that we're going to hold on to this vision and these set of values. We have to provide employees with a respectful and safe working environment. That's first. And then as a result of that, we wouldn't be tolerating any harassment or mistreatment because we have a respectful and safe working environment. I'm going to read to you the same statement that I found online for Uber's policy statement around this, their vision statement. They say, we want Uber to be enjoyable and safe for everyone. Okay, good. These ground rules are designed to ensure that riders and drivers have a 5-star ride when using Uber. Please take a moment to read them, because whether you're a rider trying to get from A to B or a partner wanting to earn money as a driver, your behavior matters. Okay, so what's the focus of that? Is the focus really on the employees in a respectful workplace, or is it on having a 5-star experience and making money? So it's, I want you to attend to that. Those two vision statements indicate a different approach and a different style of leadership. And I'd much like to refer you to the one on Facebook. So that's part of setting the vision. We're going to work through doing that, those vision statements, and how to reflect harassment and discrimination when we do CultureEQ 2018 in March in Sacramento and Oakland. Moving on, we have an entire series of behaviors and expectations that we have of leaders. It's not just setting the vision. Once you set the vision, you need to align it across the organization and enable people to be able to meet that vision. Very much like the picture that's showing there of the canoeing skull, the team canoe there, very much like that. The leader can set the tone and say, stroke, or let's go, or we're going to really do well, and we're really going to work hard today, and we're going to win. And they can set that vision for sure. But if they don't align that across this whole team by declaring stroke, 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 or whatever, for the paddling, it won't be in synchronization, and the team would not be aligned with the entire purpose of that organization, the organization of this team, in order to get that accomplished. In addition, the leadership of this event, of this sport, this team for the school, for instance, would be responsible for enabling these canoeists to perform at their best. So that would mean having oars that are the right length and paddles the right size, and the equipment, the scull itself, being state-of-the-art, and having uniforms that are compliant with this particular sport. So, and making sure that they're warm enough and cool enough. All of those things are enabling factors that enable this team to do that. conditioning exercises, all the rest of it. So in addition to setting a vision, we really need to be able to align, that is, communicate that vision across the team, across the organization, as well as enabling people to be able to execute on that vision. So in the good old days, back in the 1900s, woohoo, and I do go back that far, I remember times of command and control, and some people continue to try command and control in order to try to set a vision and align it and enabling people. That hasn't worked out so well. And I'm wondering, Lawrence, if you might take a turn in looking at that issue.
Yeah, sure. And Sejal, if you've got anything that comes to mind here, we're going to start talking about how culture is emerging from these activities, and whether it's intentional or whether it's a product of good or bad players in the workforce. Does anything come to mind right now as we're talking about setting a vision and things that have been working well or working badly in the marketplace?
Sure. Yeah. And I was just going to add to Dr. Hines' interest into what needs to happen in order for the culture of the organization to stay afloat. And just a recent case study that I read about Airbnb, it kind of reminded me of some of the ways that you can fix or align your vision and enable all employees to make the vision and the culture of the organization sort of align together. And in this case study about Airbnb, what I read was that their approach to the culture is obviously the vision of the founders, but how they then, communicate that vision to all of the employees is by sort of having this unrelenting belief that there needs to be honest two-way communication. Believe the way they go about doing that, and I think it's really important, because I think a lot of organizations are to wonder, how can I align my culture and get it so that the vision and the culture are aligned, everybody participate. So what they do is that on a basis they have because they have all over the world. So they have a bi-weekly meeting for all employees that everyone participates in. And then every country or city office then has an informal meeting towards the end of the week. And then the executive team meets weekly. And then within 24 hours, they distribute the meeting minute notes to every single person in the company. And so by doing this, they're basically enabling HR and all employees to participate in making the culture align with the vision. Another thing they do is they've started doing annual cultural engagement studies of all of their employees and staff to make sure that, okay, we've got a wonderful vision, we're communicating it, but is it really impacting the organization? Is it really getting the culture where we want it to be? And some of the other things they did, I thought were really good tools for organizations, is that they've developed an entire team that basically is what they call an employee retention team. And basically this team does all kinds of things for various employees, such as birthday parties or anniversary celebrations, baby showers, etc. They also host a page on their company website where everybody can informally get to know each other and build their own internal networks to help each other in doing their jobs and building relationships. Because as we all know, most of us, unfortunately spend a lot more time at work than we do at home. So we definitely want to encourage people to have healthy relationships in the workplace. And they also do, they've changed their recruitment practices, for example. So they have recruitment where they have a panel that's set, that's selected by the founders of the company who recruit in a way that's going to, not eliminate, but mitigate the risk of potential discrimination from occurring in the recruitment process. And then once the person gets the job, they go through this whole week-long process where they get educated on the values, the business strategies, and learn to know who they're going to be reporting to, the key players in the organization, and really just make sure that everyone feels welcome to that culture of the organization. So that's a really great way for organizations to kind of follow that kind of roadmap to get where they need to be.
Yeah, that sounds really wonderful. I mean, it's when that company decided as a company to provide that kind of employee support and communication, and providing platforms for them to communicate, really putting their actions where their mouth is, being able to do something meaningful for their employees and help them to engage in a positive way with the company. So one of the things that we want to lean on here too is the role that managers play in an organization. They have influence with the teams that they manage. And when the message is strong from the company, and the behavior is clearly laid out, what the expectations are, then it's a little easier to coach managers to a specific way of managing people that is respectful. And if we are to look at managers as lifelong learners and that they want to do good within the organization, then that opens up a discussion with them to be able to articulate the vision in a way that makes sense for them in their style of management. And identifying what strengths that manager brings to the team is a big part of that. Identifying how they choose to communicate with their staff is a big part of that, and making sure that everybody feels comfortable and that it is following the themes that the company is putting out is important as well. So when we get together in the live workshop here in a few weeks, those are some of the things that we'll be discussing, exactly how it is that managers' styles impact the rollout of a vision, and what impact that has in reality on the teams, and what kind of feedback are people getting. So from going from what's stated by the company to what's really happening, you may see that everybody's in alignment, but you may start to see where there's an opportunity to have managers engage with their staff in new ways to be more positive and to reduce instances of discrimination and harassment. Okay, so when you do that, when you are being intentional about the vision that's set and the process for aligning managers, it's essentially a grooming process. So when a company puts out the vision, it communicates it out to the field, people start looking at others' actions and the way that they treat that. So are they buying in to the company's vision? Are they buying into the nuances that we're adding to do things like prevent harassment or to be inclusive of all of the employees? You hear the cliches of things like actions speak louder than words, or that people will believe it when they see it. And managers have an opportunity to demonstrate that on a regular basis. Now, an interesting thing about leadership is that it's not just managers or named leaders that have a leadership role. Leadership really isn't defined by your title, although having a title should indicate that you've got some idea of leadership skill, and it may have gotten you that title. But there are other people within the organization that are charismatic and play a leadership role on teams, whether it's ad hoc teams or if they're just an affluent person within their work groups. Their leadership counts as well. So when a message is rolled out, and Sejal, I liked the example that you provided earlier, because they worked into all aspects of the employee experience, that this message and this vision is important, and provide tools around that, that the leaders that are emerging from within the ranks are also behind the message. So, and again, Sejal, I don't know if there are any other examples that may come to mind where organizations are either succeeding at this, or if there are any challenges to that.
Sure. Yeah. Lawrence, it's I think the media has drawn attention to a lot of, just in the last several years, we've seen in the media cultural meltdowns that have happened. And it's just interesting now, speaking from, having worked in the legal industry since 2003, it seems like people are, this has become a big deal because the media has played such a huge role in this. But this type of cultural meltdowns have been going on for years. One case that comes to mind that I can think of is there was a case in 2014. And I'm sure many of us have heard of that case. It was an employee. Her name was Julie Horwath, and she used to work for a startup called GitHub. And basically, she resigned from her position and then went on Twitter and basically talked about how the company had an alpha male culture, that, and I bring this example up because a lot of the smaller employers that I'm speaking to right now have this sort of, especially in the Silicon Valley, this mentality that, oh, we're small, we're pretty small, and so we're supportive of, having a certain type of culture, and we don't really need to look at our culture and analyze it and figure out whether a vision aligns with it, because we're so small we can keep a handle on it. And in fact, this is not true. You need to start when you are small, because what happened in that case was that, she joined the company in 2012 when the company was pretty small. And the culture was supportive of the women that were on their staff. But over time, she realized and was the only female designer on their team. And basically, when you read some of her Twitter posts or tweets, she talks about how she felt that, she was not respected and her opinion was not valued in the workplace. And she felt that she was being treated differently because of her gender and rather than the quality of her work. And so interesting in that case is that they did an internal investigation. And even though the company's investigator found that there was no actual harassment that took place based on their investigation, it was interesting because the CEO, Preston Werner, still resigned after all these complaints came out. So, that brings up that point of, leadership and really what's going on behind closed doors that we may not know about or we may not understand, but highlights the fact that, these things have serious ramifications if they're not addressed early on.
Great, cool. Thanks, Sejal. And it really goes to illustrate, at a cultural level, when the people are quiet about stuff or aren't respected about stuff, that becomes an accepted form of behavior in the organization. And yeah, that's absolutely something that this process would change.
Yeah, exactly. And I really like the image that we chose here for this of the bonsai, the person trimming that. I'm going to get into that, but just as a reminder here, we're going to be coming up on a question and answer period. So if you do have any questions, go ahead and put them into the chat area there so that we can address those. And back to the bonsai here, it's being cultivated, and it's something that I think we need to continue to pay attention to. This has to be intentional. If you just put out a vision statement or just put out a set of policies, and even if you align them and create the initial enablement to do this, some workshops or whatever, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to take root and grow the way that you want it to. In a field, for instance, if you plant a particular type of seed and you want to have a crop grow up, then you need to continue to nurture and maintain that and weed it and water it, etc. Otherwise, other seeds will get in there and the weeds are just going to choke out whatever crop that you wanted. And it's the same thing with company culture. You need to cultivate it. You need to not only plant it and initially take care of it, but you need to continue to work on it, continue to weed it, to make sure that people are continue to be aligned and continue to be enabled to do that. So I think we have some comment from Tim. He would like to give us an example as well.
Yeah, so one anecdote, we're talking about the, the importance of, or really the danger that the culture of silence that Lawrence referred to. And one example came to mind that really reaches, and it's been in the news the last few days even, reaches the highest level of the leadership in our country. A federal judge in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals was accused of sexual harassment. He was the chief judge for many years, Chief Judge Alex Kaczynski, and he was very publicly accused of inappropriate conduct with his law clerks. And this comes to mind when we talk about the culture of silence and the dangers that it can present. When you have people with that level of authority, and within the judicial system, there's very strict rules about, for obvious reasons, what happens in chambers kind of stays in chambers, that these are deliberative processes that are sacred and that should not be made public. That's all true, and there's good reason for that. But where do you draw the line when the holder of that level of authority abuses it to the level of, in this particular case, one of the most egregious allegations was that the judge was, exposing his law clerks to pornography on his computer in chambers and asking what they thought of it. Other inappropriate conduct occurred that are all now public. And others came forward and said, yeah, this, similar things happened to me too. Well, this has somewhat of a tragic ending for now anyway, because a inquiry was initiated, investigation into his conduct, and was taken up by the Supreme Court of the United States, who has jurisdiction over this matter. And he, after this investigation was open, resigned. And I think it was just yesterday that Chief Justice John Roberts said, well, there's nothing we can do now because he's no longer a judge and we can't investigate this matter any further. So begs the question, well, what happens next? That he just gets off scot-free because of the power structure in the judiciary? And that might be the case now. And I think there's going to be some serious discussion and debate about this issue in DC about how do we prevent these abuses of power. And it's not only judiciary, it's in the state and national lawmaking bodies as well. And I know that this doesn't necessarily apply to a lot of us who are in the private sector, but it goes to show the great, tremendous amount of damage that having a culture that values silence and the sacredness of confidentiality above anything else.
Yeah, it's a good point, Tim, also about what we're talking about here today. It's about leadership and leadership's role in setting the expectations and setting the culture. And if those leaders essentially abuse their power for their own gain and set up a culture for their own benefit and not for everyone in the organization, these kinds of behaviors and allegations can come forth from that out of a lack of leadership. So Lawrence, you want to talk a little bit about where we go from here on this, where we're going to be headed from here?
Yeah, sure. I've just got a brief note on that, and that will wrap up today's discussion. And then just after this, we'll be taking some questions. And it looks like we've got a couple of questions already. So we'll pause for a second so that those who want to drop can drop, and then those who want to hang on for the Q&A can do that. So at this point, where do we go regarding why leaders fail at preventing workplace harassment? Well, a couple of things that you can do right away to get sort of a pulse check on what's going on with your company. First thing is to make sure that you define the expectations of culture in the organization. Then test your expectations across the organization, maybe with a survey. You can collect data and plan for making changes to employee behavior, including manager and top-level leadership within the company. Train people to the expectations. So in all aspects of people's training, it's important to have that cultural experience and then track your progress as necessary. A couple of the items from the legal side of the house would also include making sure that you've got any updates to your employee handbook and that any posters and internal policies are available and publicly available, as you well know. And then supervisors have to be trained up in any new areas that those reflect. So do you have any last comments before we get to Q&A?
Sure, Lawrence, this is Sejal. I just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware that, in October of last year, Governor Brown signed a bill, Senate Bill 396, which is now law and took effect in January, which requires that all California, organizations make sure that, we've already had the training that all managers go through 2-hour sexual harassment training to all supervisor employees once every 2 years, and then within 6 months of an employee starting a supervisory position. Well, they amended that bill and added to make sure that now they want to make sure that the training includes topics of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender employees, and then make sure that a component of that is covered within that mandatory training, as well as they're required to post. Employers that have more than 50 employees are required to have a poster advising these individuals of their rights in a visible location. So just make sure that everybody out there is in compliance with these new laws that took place on January 1st of this year.
Great, thank you, Sejal. So just to wrap up this section here, we've got one more webinar that's dedicated to bystander intervention. So if that's something that is interesting to you, definitely join us for the next webinar in 2 weeks. You can get details on joining that and in joining our live hands-on workshop coming up in March at the address on the screen. That's workforceeq.com/weevents/CultureEQ-2018. And guess we'll pause now. Anybody who doesn't want to participate in Q&A, you can go ahead and drop off, but we'll get to the first question here momentarily. All right, looks like our first question here is, who should be involved in creating the company vision?
Right, so I think if I could take that one.
Yeah.
I think that of course, we've been talking about the leadership role here, and leaders at any level, as you pointed out earlier, leaders can emerge from different levels. And leaders do have the responsibility for making sure that this is done. The question from our participant there is about who gets involved in shaping that vision. Again, certainly it's the leader that is responsible for that. In a number of organizations, particularly those who have a good culture, good trusting environment in their culture, they will look for feedback and information coming from all sectors of the organization. So you might have a very small company, in which case that's a matter of a single or a couple of meetings and some discussions, or you might have a large company where you do more surveying and going through managers and getting feedback and rolling that up. I think it's important that these other viewpoints are reflected in the vision. It's the responsibility of the leader to boil that down and make it very clear exactly what we're talking about. And again, I'll refer back to the one in Facebook, setting out first what is our expectation and why is it that we're doing this? Because we want to have this healthy workplace. We want people to enjoy coming to work. We want people to be productive, have a learning environment, have meaningful work. We want all of those things, and this is one aspect of that that's going to support that. So it's important that you get input from across the organization. It's also important as a leader to be able to articulate that very clearly and boil it down to something that's alignable and actionable. Does that make sense?
Yeah, great. I think we can move on to the next question. It's similar. But in this case, looks like we've got somebody that's not part of the top level executive team. So how would I get the attention of the top level leadership in the organization to start this change process?
Yeah, that's good, because different companies have different cultures, different kinds of, you'll excuse the term, sort of politics that go on, particularly in the upper echelons of the organization and depending on how large it is. So you're directly bringing that up if you're in the next level of management, might be seen in some cases as trying to call out something that the leadership does not want to deal with, or hasn't in the past, and you're calling them to task, kind of a whistleblower type of thing. So you do have to be careful when you do that. At the same time, perhaps you've got someone, your boss, the person that you report to, or someone on the executive team that you think would resonate with this topic, is sensitive to it, and that you have a sidebar conversation with them before bringing up anything officially, and just saying, what are we doing about this? And they may have some insight to say, oh yeah, the team's working on it or whatever, and maybe can use your help on helping to articulate that. Just tread carefully, in terms of your job and your role, and please do take it forward with someone who's trusted.
Yeah, great. Yeah, avoid that culture of silence. Right, absolutely.
We'll do much more about that next time in bystander. Right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We'll have good tips for that. If you have more questions, please engage with us on our Facebook page. We'll be happy to answer them. And by all means, come to the next webinar and the live event in March, where we're going to get hands-on and put some plans together to actively solve some of these problems in your organizations. Thank you very much. If you want to email us, we're at info@workforceeq.com. And then our page in Facebook is at WorkforceEQ.